All right. Again, thank you thank you to everybody who came out this evening to help us call for justice for Jaimi Cody and to support Cindy Cody, Jaimi's stepmom, and Dan, his father, as they speak to the media. As the folks here know, on April 27th, Jamison Cody lost his life inside that county building at the hands of the Sangamon County Sheriffs. And whether or not homicide in a coroner's report attributes intent, homicide means that your life was taken by somebody else. One of the biggest things that has not been highlighted is that the correctional officers that killed Jamison have never been placed on leave, have never been suspended pending investigation. They're still in there patrolling the halls and interacting with inmates. And if this is how they were trained, how can we know that this isn't going to happen again while they're on duty? And what's going to happen if they're charged with manslaughter and have been working this whole time? Sangamon County has had a history of incidents like this. Since the mid-2000s, Paul Carlock, Patrick Burns, and now Jamison Cody have been killed in the building behind me in incidents that involve tasers. That's nearly 3% of all inmate taser-related deaths in the United States in that time period, despite us only having 200,000 people in our county. It's almost 5,000 times the amount you would expect based on our population. The Illinois State Department of Corrections does not issue tasers to their correctional officers. The Federal Bureau of Prisons does not issue tasers, having cited an increased propensity for abuse in a jail setting. Why do we still have tasers in the Sangamon County Jail? 10 years ago, when Patrick Burns was killed in the same building, and this is Ally Perko, Patrick's daughter, and thank you. I apologize. Thank you so much for coming. Shortly after he was killed, Jack Campbell, before he was sheriff, said he didn't feel you could tase somebody too much. You tase them until they comply. It's not a non-lethal weapon. They call it less lethal for a reason, because it has the ability to kill. And when you're having people who are discharging them without regard for the life and safety of the person that they're trying to force to comply, we end up back at the same position that we've been in now for the third time in 15 years. I'll say a few more words at the end, but my main goal here is to support Cindy, and so if you guys would like to say thank you to Cindy Cody for coming and give her your support. She has some things she'd like to say.
Okay, I don't think I can say much better than he just did.
You do have to get right up on this one here.
Oh, okay. Well, my name's Cindy Cody. I've been Jaimi's stepmother since he was 6 years old. Jaimi's father, Dan Cody, my husband, here with me. We were both residents of Springfield. I worked in the Springfield City Clerk's office, and Dan's been a firefighter. We've lived in Springfield all our lives, and I'm here today to speak from our heart. We are. To ask for help to get some answers. I have watched much of the video that was released, reviewed the Divernon police report, the autopsy report, Jaimi's death certificate, and spoken to Coroner Allman. These are things I never dreamt in my whole life I would have to do, or Dan. What I know and have seen, Jaimi was subdued and quiet during the Divernon police transport to Springfield. And from the video of his booking into the Sangamon County Jail, in fact, none of the videos I have seen of Jaimi in the jail showed him to be combative or resisting. I saw Jaimi calmly walk out of the cell with his arms out. He had his arms out. He was ready to be handcuffed. Then the tape goes blank and is blocked out for 2 minutes. Those are the most crucial part of the tape. Why is that always missing? Why? because their equipment maybe sucks. Well, maybe they'll invest in more instead of killing people. I do not know why several, and that was 3 or 4 possibly, obese. We're talking maybe 900 pounds. 900 pounds, almost a ton, sitting on Jaimi. These obese officers sat on him. I want to know why. Why was he tasered in the chest and legs approximately 5 times? I don't know the names of those individual officers, and I understand not one of them has been put on administrative leave or suspension pending the investigation. I know his death certificate indicated his manner of death was the result of some other individuals, but do not know their names. I know Jaimi's cause of death was injury by correctional officers, restraint, asphyxia, homicide. I want to know their names. They need to be held responsible. They need to learn how to control themselves. They're talking about Jaimi being uncombative or combative. I think they're the ones that are combative. This has happened before under Jack Campbell's, when he was the sheriff, and under sheriff, when it happened before, and now the sheriff, when it happened to Jaimi. When will he demand to stop this? He condones what his officers are doing. He thinks it's per protocol. Sorry. When was I want to see
justice.
He says that his officers use the methods and techniques that they were learned through their training. I want to see the policy that says officers may sit on a person until he stops breathing. I want to see the policy that gave these officers the right to be the judge, jury, and his executioner of our son. I know a lot of people will say Jaimi was not good, frequently in trouble. I know Jaimi was a troubled individual. He drank, he used drugs, resulting in previous trouble with the law and being incarcerated in Sangamon County Jail. Jaimi knew some of these correctional officers, and they knew him. I know Jaimi suffered burns, numerous tasers, and blunt force injuries. Blunt force on his head, his body. And the bruises even showed through the makeup at his funeral. I know the jail has locked doors, and Jaimi could not have escaped. I don't know why he had to die at the hands of these unknown correctional officers. I know we loved our son. He's my stepson. I loved him more than life. And he had many good qualities, and our hearts are broken. I know of many deaths while being taken into custody or in custody has happened in our country. I know too many have happened in our city and county, and no one's held us responsible, accountable. No one's suspended. If somebody died at my hands, I wouldn't be able to look in the mirror. I don't care if it was accidental. I don't care if it was murder, whatever it was, whatever they want to call it. Those people need to have time off to adjust to what they have done to other people. What I do not know is why Sheriff Campbell initially misrepresented facts about his officers going to his cell, and Jaimi was resisting, and they had to remove him from his cell when the video from the jail shows otherwise, and it does. Why does Sheriff Campbell withhold the names of the people responsible for our son's death? Why does Sheriff Campbell not hold himself or his officers accountable? Why do people not care how Jaimi died? He was our son. He was loved. And his life mattered to us and his children. We need the answers. Sheriff Campbell, this is the 3rd time for death under his watch. All from tasers and such. In this case, Jaimi suffocated. But Mr. Carlock, Mr. Burns, Cindy Cody, all died under Sheriff Campbell's watch. He needs to resign. He needs to be accountable for what has happened. And if they're being accountable, as these people have went through training, and this is a type of training. They need to go back to school. Thank you all. I appreciate everybody that's come out in support of us and Jaimi. I just hope we get some justice in the future so this doesn't happen to somebody else. Because if it keeps going like this, it will happen again. It could be your son, it could be yours, anybody's. It could be your mother. It's uncalled for. This kind of treatment is uncalled for. Thank you.
I was gonna say I'm sorry because I am slightly emotional after hearing Cindy describe that, but I'm not sorry, I'm pissed. I'm pissed off that this has happened yet again in our city, and there's been no accountability by a man who acts cavalier about the way his officers behave. This isn't the first time he's been flippant when addressing the behavior of his officers that has resulted in death. It's unacceptable for a man in that position. Not even just that they have happened, which is incomprehensible, but his attitude and behavior. They acted as they were trained. So his officers are trained to kill. Kill a man whose mother called because he needed help. I've seen my own mother go through the death of my sister about 6 years ago, and the ways in that it changed her, and I couldn't imagine how it feels to have called for your loved one to get help and then get a call that they're gone. The people in the building behind me haven't been served their due process yet. They haven't gone to trial. They haven't been convicted. They're here awaiting that. And they have rights, including the right to not be murdered. And like we've said, it's not the first time that it's occurred here. Just over 10 years ago, Patrick Burns was brought in and then tasered 25 times. And his daughters have come to speak today.
Hi, my name is Ally Perko. This is Andy. We are the daughters of Jody Perko and Patrick Burns. Grief is complex. There are many facets within it, and it is experienced in many ways. It makes a speech both difficult to write and to read. I don't share this story openly with others. It takes time and trust. So I appreciate all of your support in this moment. On January 28th of 2010, my father died after being in a coma for several days as a result of police brutality. My dad wasn't perfect. He had broken into a woman's home while high on cocaine. He didn't steal anything. He didn't threaten violence. He wasn't malicious, but he was suffering through a mental health episode. My father experienced a series of traumas throughout his youth, which influenced his ability to manage his symptoms. I'm not making excuses for my father's actions, but I believe his death was unjust. The county sheriffs who responded to the 911 call exerted excessive force by tasing him over 25 times. In this way, his death is similar to Jamison Cody's. This ultimately led to my father's death. I vividly remember the moment I found out that my dad was in the hospital. My little sister and I were sitting on the dining room floor playing. She was like 5, 6. I could tell something wasn't wrong when my mom was on the phone, but I had no idea how terrible it would be. The days following included many trips to the hospital, questions about whether he would wake up or not, and a meeting where my family decided to pull the plug. I, at the age of 15, held his hand as he took his last breath, surrounded by family who loved him dearly. The effects of this traumatic experience did not end when my father's life ended. To this day, I'm still affected by it. When county sheriff's officers drive by, I wonder if they were there that night. I'm saddened by the fact that my father and I cannot get to know one another as adults. He won't walk me down the aisle or meet his future grandchildren. His birthday, Father's Day, Christmas, and other holidays are blanketed by a permeating sense of loss. Though this grief does not define me, it is a part of me. It affects my relationships, my mental health, and my day-to-day experience. Though the story is my own, it's not unique. Unfortunately, many families share a similar pain. Jamison Cody's family now does too. Although my dad's skin color affected him certain privileges, he also existed as a member of a marginalized community, those with mental illness. Treatment and Advocacy Center reports that those with mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by police officers. The National Alliance on Mental Illness says that half of those killed by police have a disability. That being said, it doesn't matter what marginalized community someone is or isn't a part of, nobody deserves to die at the hands of officers, with their final moments spent in fear, isolation, and brutality. Because of qualified immunity, the police responsible for our dad's death, and probably Jamison Cody's, cannot be charged in criminal court. As a result, neither my family, my father, Jamison Cody's, and his family will ever receive justice. Though I've grown to manage my grief, the lack of justice continues to drive my passion for fighting systematic oppression at every level. That is why I support police reform, mental illness advocacy, Black Lives Matter, and so on. A week ago, my mom and I came to the downtown farmers market. There we saw our friend. He's a Black man in his late 50s who has experienced homelessness, and although he is no longer homeless, he still hangs out on the streets every day. He has schizophrenia, along with a multitude of other mental health disorders and physical ailments. He's difficult to understand when he speaks, but he's very friendly. I was worried when we walked up because a police officer and a man were standing next to him. It turns out the police officer has known him for years. She was just checking up on him. The man standing there was a mental health specialist. They just wanted to know if he had been to the doctor lately or had his medication still. That is a step in the right direction, but just a minuscule step towards what needs to be done for police reform. Our friend was safe that day, but my dad wasn't. Jamison Cody wasn't. So keep coming to rallies, protest, go to marches, write to your legislator, post on social media, and keep fighting. We are the ones who give voices to those that have been lost to police brutality. Thank you for listening.
We've sat here for the last year as people have been in the streets and heard our city officials, our city police, our county police say that while these things are occurring in other places, that's not Springfield, that's not Sangamon County, we're doing great. What's happened over the last few months is their transgressions have began to come to light. Officer Taylor's staff was removed from the Springfield Police for sexual misconduct with a domestic violence victim. Recently, there was an officer who resigned after being investigated for stalking a domestic violence victim. 8 Springfield police officers are being named in a suit for desecrating the ashes of a 2-year-old. Back in February, members of the Faith Coalition for the Common Good met with Sheriff Jack Campbell to talk about using isolation for people who are under the influence of drugs and people experiencing mental illness. This is something that there have been multiple studies on that have shown that isolation is not the best practice in these cases. Sticking them in a cell and coming by every half hour to see if everything's okay is not the best practice when you have somebody who's intent on harming themselves. We need a complete overhaul here in Sangamon County. It's obvious that it's not one incident. It's a culture of policing that has gone wrong. And that culture, as far as Sangamon County itself goes, that's on Sheriff Jack Campbell. He's been in this position for far too long and has had multiple deaths on his hands. He needs to resign. We need somebody in there that's going to take these investigations seriously, that we can know will hold the people under them accountable when the times call for it. Yes, Bruce?
I'd like you to talk about Gregory Small for a moment, if we could.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Small, as you may or may not be aware, had attacked his mother in 2018, necessitating 10 staples to her head and knocking out several of her teeth. She was hospitalized for several days. He was in the midst of...
I'm not going to field a question regarding the past criminality or past behavior of somebody who's assaulted by law enforcement, because past behaviors don't affect a
But you are
current
talking
instance.
about all kinds of police rounded up into one big ball. What I want to ask you about directly is, can police sometimes have accomplished good?
Yes.
Will you acknowledge that police have accomplished good in the Gregory Small case, in the interactions, that he may well be dead, or somebody else may be dead, if police hadn't done what they've done in Gregory Small's case? That's the question.
What would have happened if Chatham had actually sent one of their officers that had been trained in mental health response? Because that didn't happen.
Have you seen the video? He was charging somebody with a knife.
We're not talking
Somebody
about
who
that
hadn't
right
been
now.
trained.
So we don't want to talk about that right now.
How about the family?
We want to talk
How about the family?
Bruce, we're not going to hijack
We want to
this.
talk about this case
This
and
is
that
for
case and every
justice
other
for
case.
her.
Bruce,
and
we're-
his family. Stop
I understand
hijacking the rally.
that.
Stop hijacking the rally.
I'm not hijacking.
Gregory
You know
Small's
what?
family
There's
will
a lot of
speak
good
for
police.
Gregory
There's a
Small.
lot of
I want
Sangamon.
to hear from Mom, not from you, John. Let's
I'm
hear from her.
not. I don't think anybody here is trying to say that there's a lot of bad police officers or sheriffs under the county. There's individuals that need to be trained differently. There's people that are over those individuals that sees no reason to do that. He thinks what they do is under the guidelines. To put 1,000 pounds almost on a person's body, I think that's a little overkill.
And it's fair
He
to
was
say-
already dead, probably, from the tasering.
There you go. Yeah,
No,
say his name.
here's what I'm saying. Time out, listen.
No, you're not.
No.
No, this isn't your show, Bruce. This is not
Oh,
your
please,
show.
please don't do this.
Disrespectful. I'm going to ask
I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
You are being disrespectful.
You're not doing that.
Leave Bruce. Leave Bruce. Go away.
Bruce, this is not what I expected.
Unacceptable.
It's
Unacceptable.
Illinois Times at that.
You know, it's insane to argue like this.
It is, you're right.
You're the
So-
perpetrator.
I'm not arguing.
You bringing up a whole nother situation that has nothing
He
to do
was
with what's
bringing up
going on
all
right
kinds
now.
of situations that had nothing to do with this incident. Carlock is an absolute carbon copy case of this, where somebody laid on top of somebody.
Exactly.
Absolutely, we agree on that. But what I'm questioning is you, Mr. Keating, bringing up all these cases that have nothing to do
Injustice
with
is the common
Jaimi
denominator
Cody.
here.
Because all
Injustice
three
is
of
the
those
common
cases,
denominator.
those people were tasered, and they were
Absolutely
killed.
right, and Pat Burns belongs in that category.
They
You're
were-
right.
They were
His
killed
name is Cody,
under
not
the
Codison.
I'm
excuse me.
Cody, I'm sorry. Jamison Cody.
Respect. Show some respect.
Wow.
People
We are out here
People
for-
are grieving here, and this is what you do. Thank you. It's just incredible.
I don't mean to
You
file.
are being so
You seriously
disrespectful.
do. Like, you need to
go
leave.
away.
Hold
You
on,
need to not-
hold on. Let me make a point. 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 We are out here for their son's death, who was sat on untasered. How many times? 5 times?
5 times.
You don't need to be tased 5 times just to apprehend somebody. There are levels of force.
Well, you got 3 people that weigh 300 pounds each sitting on you. Why?
Agreed.
Why
Be
tase him 5
ridiculous
times?
He was
handcuffed behind his back when they tased him.
I don't disagree
was
with you. I don't disagree with you at all.
Then maybe shut the fuck up. Maybe shut up. Huh? Maybe listen. Maybe
I am
listen.
listening. I am listening.
Okay, then shut up.
You're here to report. You're not
I was here to ask a question, and I'm sorry for you too,
It was a
because
rude question.
this is.
Very
Your time is up, sir.
Sir,
Seriously.
I believe what we're here to call into question is a system at fault.
I agree with that.
I don't think that the character of every police officer has to be that of someone who wants to murder in order to have a system that allows people to get away with that.
I agree with that.
I don't think anyone here has called into question the character of every police officer, but rather the system which is allowing this injustice. I will
He
let
brought,
him speak.
he brought up things having to do with Springfield police officers.
Are you still
that have
talking?
nothing to do with this.
Seriously? Like,
We're talking
stop.
about accountability.
Stop.
systematic.
And we should talk about accountability.
The fact that there are good cops is true, but the fact that there are bad cops is true too. And it's time that bad cops are held accountable for the shit that they do. And
I
that is
agree with
not
that.
happening.
I agree with that.
That is not happening, and that is why we're here.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. What I am saying is this: that there's
Look, they're still
No, I have
grieving.
not.
They are still grieving.
Well,
These
okay.
women are still grieving.
cologne.
These women are still
smell like
grieving.
you
Look
smell
at
like
them in the
weed.
eye.
Look at them.
Look at them in the eye.
Look at
They
them.
are still grieving.
Look at them. They are
Still
hurt.
grieving. From
They
their
are hurt.
mother's death, they are still
Can
grieving.
you not see the hurt in their eyes? The pain that they are feeling? When is that gonna start to matter? How many more people do need to die from their hands?
Bruce, you've been very kind to me when I've spoken with you always.
and I appreciate that.
What's going on? What?
I guess-
because
I
he
guess-
He's being a
mentioned
bully.
because he mentioned the police, the Springfield police.
Bully.
Here's what I want to say, if I could say it,
Let him say what he wants to say. I want to
and
hear
I
it.
will leave.
We would appreciate that.
Okay, no,
I'm serious.
I
Because you don't want to deal with me.
Okay.
Dan, go turn your back. Let him say what he wants to say. Say it. Say, Bruce.
What I feel is that an injustice has been done here. I agree with you, Tim. I absolutely agree. And I agree that something needs to be done. Where I have problems is when activists start bringing up things like you did, Mr. Keating, about some sort of having an internal affairs thing in the Springfield Police Department that has nothing to do with this. This is a person died here.
Maybe we just think that it does have something to do with it because it's brutality.
It does.
Systemic.
What Bruce is trying to say,
It's-
what
yeah.
Bruce is actually trying to say is that a public act has been violated and the Illinois compiled statutes has been violated. That's what he's trying to initiate in this conversation, seem like. So you're saying that they actually broke the law here. Is that what you're trying to stipulate?
I think
instead
there's
of speaking about internal affairs?
I think there's a good question as to whether the law was broken given the finding of homicide.
Right.
It's a
So
natural
we gotta
question.
go- so we speaking about
Yeah, but
Illinois compiled
what I'm
statutes
saying
and
is
public
that
acts
throwing
violations.
rocks at cops
Even the dog doesn't
like
like
this
what's going
isn't doing what everybody wants to get done.
You're
We
here
want
because an
justice, don't we?
innocent person died.
and I
If you
agree,
don't
but I'm not
believe in the right to trial, then you need to leave
all right,
America.
and I'll address this. And I agree, but I don't think that bringing up various transgressions that have occurred in our city, regardless of agency, is not related because it demonstrates a culture, a pattern of behavior. And just because they work for different agencies, these are guys that go together and get a beer after night. They know each other, they work together on their shifts. So this is something that has crossed boundaries and isn't just applied to one agency.
It's policy
And
failure all around.
I have stated multiple times, unequivocally, that I don't hate police. I hate police who act in a way that they're not trained to, that's not legal. I hate police that violate people's rights, and I hate police that allow other officers to violate people's rights and don't speak up.
To get away with murder.